There are few things worse than not knowing. In financial services, not knowing can be pretty costly. Not knowing whether the person or business on the other side of the transaction is the real deal or a fraudster costs money and relationships if the tech delivers a false decline. Not knowing also means missing out, not having the whole picture or the right picture to make decisions that will benefit all parties. That's the conversation I'll have today with Hani Pham, founder and CEO of Markaaz, with a particular focus on not knowing the small business and the missed opportunity for banks, non-bank lenders, and payments companies. Hey, Hani, thanks for joining me.
Hey, Karen. Great to see you again, as always.
Love what you guys are doing at Markaaz. So let's start by putting a number on the consequences of not knowing. And by that, I mean, do you have a sense of what the cost of missing out is for banks, payments players, the ecosystem who want to serve small businesses but don't have the right information to either onboard them, underwrite them, or serve them more broadly?
Karen, we've spoken before about the right information. I know we're going to spend some more time talking about that today, but let's address your question head on. 30% of small businesses that apply for financial services are rejected because they can't be verified. Point one. If you want to put a dollar amount on that for a large US bank, that's in the card business alone, that's somewhere around 150 to $200 million of lost revenue for the bank and a turn down for the business itself. That's very significant. So,
Yeah.
point one. Point two, and we hear this and we actually see this live with customers that we work with. Coincidentally, 30 to 50% of customers that are onboarded have their accounts frozen or are locked out within the first month.
In the first month.
Within the first month. So do the math with me. We've got 30% of people rejected before they get through the front door, another 30 to 50% frozen within the first month in some cases. Now, that's not universal for everybody,
Right.
but it's a really big number. And we have not spent anywhere enough time speaking about this in the market in terms of the cost. So the cost to small businesses, and let's just do a quick whip around the world. In the UK, we're hearing alarming numbers as high as 40% of small businesses are debanking. That means stop working with banks because banks can't monitor or can't keep track of their customers. In the United States, that's a phenomenon that's ramping up and picking up. And we've seen the wave of fintechs and bespoke boutique lenders come and go. And we're back to sort of square one now. With all the clever technology in the market, we're still seeing these very challenging statistics at play here. And for a small business, lack of access to those things means one of two things happens. It falls back on the shoulders of the business owner, and it's basically a consumer transaction scored on the business owner, or it falls to minimum loss ratio levels, which means the business doesn't get anywhere near what they need to run their business properly.
And obviously not to grow their business either. So there's a lot of quantifiable and intangible, but obviously very important consequences as well. Hey, Hani, a question that we've talked about before, but I'm not sure whether we've ever really precisely answered this. Do the relying parties know what they have isn't good enough, or is the friction of knowing more and getting it better too high? So everyone says, I'll just take my chances, and take my chances means I'm going to have this 30% and 30% problem, or I'm just going to turn the business away before I ever get started.
Let me tell you a dirty little secret. What actually happens is you end up in most organizations with two sets of data. So if I'm a financial institution or an insurance company for that matter, or a retailer, and you're a small business, I have a file of the things we do together. So this is for a business that's got through the door on whatever terms, right? I have a file of what we do. Over here, on the other side, for compliance reasons, I buy in a whole bunch of data. We see examples of anywhere between 20 incremental data sets and 100 incremental data sets. Everyone's got another cool data set.
Wow.
Not a single player in the market uses intelligence to merge those two sets of files to create one single golden record for their customer base. So what does that mean? More data is coming about, more boutique data. I'll give you a stat of what it's costing a reasonably large institution, somewhere between $50 and $100 million a year to buy the data.
To buy the data.
Just to buy it. Just
Wow.
literally to buy it. And we know the names of all the usual suspects in that space. Then there's the question of what the heck do I do with it? Every single incremental data set that has to be deduped and matched with another causes an exponential level of friction and an exponential level of complication. And so what happens? The data is there for compliance and risk management, which means the risk and compliance folks usually get the last word because they say, look at this data, something has changed. The bankers and the relationship managers say, but this is what my customer is doing. Look at this. And it's an entirely manual argument between the two parties. And the one that loses out in all cases is the small business itself.
The small business.
Yeah.
It is, I mean, it's just mind-boggling to think about all the data sets and to your point about the deduping, but do you even know that the data in the data set is correct? And by that, I mean, do you trust the source of that information to have it complete? We'll define what complete means, but timely, up to date, the relevant information around which to make the right decisions. I mean, who's checking to make sure all of that is in fact complete, accurate, timely?
So let's be direct about this. The legacy players algorithmically fill gaps in the data, and they don't monitor at the lower end of the market, the SMB, and they're more occupied with the upper end of the market. And there is universal frustration and universal discontent with the quality of data that's coming from the legacy players. I don't want to name names. We know all of that. There's a lot of new players who are acting in real time, where they get a query and they'll basically go out to a Secretary of State or to a data source and say, this is what we found, here you go, do what you want with it.
And that can take a very long time.
It takes a very long time. It can take 72 hours more in some cases. And even if it's fast, people are using statistical models with that data. We hear fill rates, which means the data you have about a customer can be as low as 40%.
Really?
We hear verification levels with all those data sets added up can be as low as in the 50s, 60s, and 70%, which goes back to our earlier point.
Yeah.
The provenance of the data, yes, we can say the source I got it from, and yes, it's a name that's known in the market. It doesn't mean the data is accurate. And that happens for two reasons. The data is not updated in a timely fashion in most cases.
Right.
One. Two, people use look over your shoulder, screen scraping, all sorts of stuff to statistically model the likelihood that the data is accurate. That's not a good thing. Three, the end user is rarely ever involved in the process. So you and I have both heard stories of businesses that say, every month I print out a ledger from my accounting system, I fax it on a fax machine to the bank, they take it, put it in a box and store it at Iron Mountain. We've heard those stories. We know it's pervasive. And why is it there? In case there's an audit, they can pull the box out from Iron Mountain and say, yes, we did track this customer. Yes, we do know our customer. Yes, we have their financials. It's an entirely manual process. There are some clever players doing character recognition and scanning of documents and making sure they haven't been modified, whatever. Yeah, there's a bunch of those. But it does not address this fundamental question of creating a true and accurate picture of the business in the market.
Yeah. Well, it's also for a different purpose. Compliance is different than I really need an answer because I want to bank this business, I want to lend to this business, I want to, provide a portfolio of services to this business. So it's obviously very broken. But the small business, in some sense, has control of their data. And I can see where banks, it's a big investment to get it right. And if there isn't a focus on the small business in serving the business as a business and not an appendage of the consumer bank, it's a big investment to make. So now the small business has the data. about the small business. But do they even have all the information? And what I'm thinking about now is there's a complete picture of the business beyond their financials. They have a digital footprint, they have a social footprint. There are lots of pieces that create a more complete view of the business that I think we've ever been able to represent as a small business data set before. Why don't small businesses take more care of their own data and make sure that it is accurate and available? Is it that they don't have the time, they don't know where to put it, or they don't know how to transmit that to someone who needs to use it?
So it's a great question. When was the last time in your business or any business that you speak to, and you speak to a lot, you heard a story of a bank proactively going to that business and saying, "Hey, guess what? I want to lend you more money. You need something to expand your business." Or
Yeah.
when was the last time somebody said, "Let me proactively do something for you"? It never happens,
Right.
right? Because most institutions are running loss mitigation models from their own perspective, not growth models for the business.
Right.
So why doesn't the business take control? Well, businesses have become numb in looking at Yelp, Google, and a bunch of other things to see what the world sees about them. That picture is so far from complete, it's not funny.
Right.
So we did research a while ago and found that a business looking for a new supplier or something else will spend an average of 2 hours on Google, and at the end of that be almost none the wiser about who they're looking for.
Right.
They'll literally end up with a name, maybe a review, a subjective review, a rating, something or other. Little to no effort is made to educate the business about what data actually exists out there about them, the errors in the data, because that in and of itself is a model. There are businesses out there that actually work on the error rate and statistically model it to make money from that.
Yep.
So when we ask small businesses, do you know that you have a credit score? The vast majority don't even know that they have a credit score.
Right.
Is the credit score for a business as relevant as it is for a consumer? No, it's not, because you said it. You said there are so many other aspects to a business beyond a credit score. A credit score is not a predictor. And we know that from speaking to a number of the bureaus who are saying, yeah, this worked for consumers. This doesn't work for small businesses. Unless, again, you're back to a consumer proposition wrapped in a different wrapper and priced higher for a business, which is what typically happens.
Yeah.
So exposing small businesses to the full scope of their data doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
I know, for our business, when we started early in the piece, nobody showed us a single view of the data about our business. They didn't even tell us what they were looking at.
Right.
We hear that universally.
Right.
So problem one. Problem two, the data is not updated in a timely fashion.
Mm-hmm.
The last time we looked at an update to, and this is going back years now, an update to our credit score as a business, we found it hadn't been updated for 252 days.
Wow. A lot can
That's on
happen
credit
in
score.
52 days.
A lot happens in
Yeah.
252 days. The third thing is small businesses are dynamic. They move fast. They're either doing something because they're passionate about it or because it's their livelihood.
Mm-hmm.
They move fast. Tracking that just doesn't happen at all. Most of what they get from their bank or whatever is, hey, update your data. I don't know what's happening in your business, so please update it. And it's voluntary. Tell me about it.
And it takes time away from what you're doing as a business, and you wonder
And they don't have time.
what is
We'll get to it later.
or what is the outcome? Like if I
Yeah.
do all this, then what will happen? What can I expect once I do that? And often it's just thank you for
Nothing.
updating.
Thank you for updating us.
Your record.
Thank you for telling us
Thank
how
you
much
for
of a
making my
risk you
job
are.
easier
Yeah,
to not really
exactly.
give you any services.
Exactly.
So why do you think you can crack this code? And cracking the code means completeness, timeliness, relevancy, but also the incentives for the business to own the data and to make sure that they have a say and a stake in keeping it current.
Okay. So cracking the code involves, in my humble opinion, three things. First of all, you need to have a universal lens. Let's call that the rose. And you need to have a resolution model that says, this is all the businesses that exist, big and small. Let's not get into complex debates about, is it a small, is it a mid, is it a whatever. And unfortunately, many organizations are structured that way, where small business is sort of the ugly stepchild of the consumer bank, or it's bundled together. And then they have constant arguments about, is it a small, is it a mid, when does it move to the next group, when do they get a relationship manager, etc.
It's inconsistent around the world.
Inconsistent around the world. There are no universal definitions. So let's not pretend to try and solve that issue. So we need a universal set of roles. And by count, Karen, active and inactive businesses in the world, legal ones, there's about 519, 520 million of them.
Wow. It's a lot of business.
Around the world, right? The exercise of resolving that these 10 businesses are actually all the same business is very, very hard and very complicated. We've done it, but we've done this for a long time, and we've done this before. So that's the rows. Then let's talk about the columns, the bits of information about the business. And there are 4 groups of columns. Column 1 is all the publicly available information in one place. You've got to put it in one place because, to your point, a small business is busy. They don't have time to go searching and create their own spreadsheet for this. It's got to be there. It's got to be clear. They've got to see it in one place. We provide about 198 columns of public information for businesses, which includes everything that you pretty much need to know that's available in the public domain.
But how do you know that it's right? How do you know that it's right? Don't you have to go and dedupe and...
We dedupe, we match, we compare sources, we verify, we do all of that. And we have the provenance of where the data came from. So that's group 1. Group 2 is information that the business voluntarily contributes about themselves. Now, we don't ask them for that. The bank or the counterparty should be asking them for that. Hey, I need this information. It's not public information. I need this from you. Oh, and by the way, I'd like to continue to monitor that about you, because if we do that, these are the good things that will happen. That's bucket 2. So it could be automated financial pools. It could be automated bank accounts. It could be CRM. It could be a number of different things. And you need to automate that, but add that to this complete picture so it's not a separate database that you have to go log in somewhere else to get. Group 3 is information that I know about my customer. So this is what the small business does with the bank or the fintech or the insurance company or the retailer or whatever. Contributing that to this complete picture is really valuable. Historically, most people have said, oh, no, that's private. I don't want anyone else to see that. But there are ways you can guard that. There are ways you can, say this is sensitive and proprietary between these two parties. That's not very complicated. We do that all the time in the credit card networks and all sorts of other things. That's easy. Group 4 is where it gets really interesting, is now using AI and some clever tech to go out and say, okay, I have a small business that's a builder. What's happening to the projected cost of lumber in the next 12 months? Let's add that to the picture. Or I have a trucking company that runs a fleet of trucks for deliveries. What's the projected fuel price going to be for the next 12 months? Let's add that to the picture and see what happens.
So it's more business intelligence.
Business intelligence, but it's anchored not around a generic idea. It's anchored around a one-to-one record, i.e., we all know about the Dunn's number. It's a blunt instrument. It's been around for a long time. Can we create a single golden record that's dynamic, that changes in real time as information about the business changes? We think the answer is yes, and we've done it.
Where does the golden record live?
It's a record that lives, it's partly the property of the business and partly the property between two parties doing business together.
The opportunity to take these golden records and operationalize them for the small businesses that are within their own ecosystem. Hanny, always a fun conversation. Thanks so much for such great insight.
Pleasure. Yeah, thanks, Karen.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Thanks. Bye-bye.